Charlie and John were the last ones to the mall. When they pulled up, the others were gathered in a tight circle in front of Marla's car as if sharing a conspiracy. Come on, Marla said before they had walked all the way to the group. She was bouncing on the balls of her feet as if she were ready to run for the door of the abandoned building. Everyone but Charlie and John had changed their clothing, wearing jeans and t-shirts, things more suited for exploration, and she had a brief moment of feeling out of place. At least I didn't wear a dress, Charlie thought. Let's go, she said. Marla's impatience seemed to be contagious, or maybe it just gave Charlie an excuse to let her real feelings come to the surface. She wanted to show Freddy's off to the others. Hold up, John said. She looked at Jessica. Did you explain everything? I'll tell him about the night guard, she said. What else is there? He looked thoughtful for a moment. I guess nothing, he said. I brought more lights, Carson said, and held up 3 flashlights of varying sizes. He tossed one to Jason, a small one with a plastic headband attached. Jason turned it on, fixed it around his head, and began moving enthusiastically in waves and circles, making the light bulb and dance. Shh, Charlie said, even though he was not making any sound. Jason, Marla whispered, turn it off. We can't attract attention, remember? Jason gleefully ignored them, spinning off into the parking lot like a top. I told him if he is not good, he has to wait in the car. Marla told Charlie quietly, but now that we're here, I'm not sure which place is creepier. She eyed the bare branches overhead, raging in the wind, threatening to reach down and grab them. Or we can feed them to Foxy. Charlie winked. She went to her trunk and hefted out the police flashlight, but she did not turn it on. Instead, Carlton switched on 2 of his smaller lights and handed one to Jessica. They headed into the mall, knowing they were going, that what was waiting for them there. Charlie, John, Jessica, and Carlton moved through the empty spaces with a sense of purpose, but the others kept stopping to look around. Come on, Jessica said impatiently as Lamar gazed up at the Arturium dome. You can see the moon, he said, and pointed next to him. Marla nodded, mimicking his posture. It's beautiful, she said, although she could not see it. From a distance, they heard footsteps echo in the emptiness. Hey, hey, over here, John hissed, and they hurried as quietly as they could. They could not run up for the fear of making noise, and so they walked, fast but careful, hugging the walls. They entered the black void of the department store, creeping along in the shadows until they reached the break in the wall. John held back the hanging plastic, obscuring the opening of the others maneuvered around the scaffolding. Jason was slow, and Charlie put a hand on his shoulder to hurry him up. As she steered him into the opening, a strong beam of light swept into the room, scanning up and down the walls. They all ducked through the plastic and ran down the alley to where the others were crouched down against the wall. He saw us, Jason whispered, alarmed, running straight to his sister. Shh, Marla said. They waited. Charlie was next to John this time, and after that moment by the tree, whatever it was, she was very almost uncomfortably aware of him. They were not quite touching, but she seemed to know exactly where he was, an awkward sixth sense. She glanced at him, but his eyes were fixed on the opening on the hallway. They could hear the guard's footsteps now, clearing the empty space, each one distant. He was moving slowly, deliberately. Charlie closed her eyes, listening. She could tell where he was from the sound. She thought, getting closer, then farther, crisscrossing the room like he was hunting for something. The steps came right up to the entrance of the alley and stopped. They all held their breaths. He knows, Charlie thought, but the steps started again, and they showed her eyes and saw the light receding. He was going away. They waited, still motionless, until they could no longer stumble a little as they stood, and she realized they had been leaning against each other without realizing it. She didn't look at him. Instead, she set to work, taking the heaviest things off of the wooden shelf. Would I be needing this? Lamar asked as Charlie handed him a bucket with a saw sticking out of it. We have to move the shelf, Jessica said. Come on. Jessica, Charlie, Carlton, and John got back to the place and moved the shelf. Lamar tried to find a place to help, but there was not really room. Marla just waited. I'm better suited to supervising, she said when Charlie mopped her. This time the screaming of the middle door was not as loud, as if it no longer protested their entrance quite so strongly. Still, Marla and Jason covered their ears. You think that's not going to bring the guard? Marla hissed. Charlie shrugged. Didn't last time, she said. I know he saw us, Jason said again. The others ignored him. His flashlight went right over me, he insisted. It's really okay, Jason, Jessica said. We thought he saw us last night too, but it was fine. Jason looked dubious, and Lamar bent over to his eye level. Hey, Jason, he said. What do you think of the guard would do if he saw us? Shoot us? Jason whimpered, eyeing Lamar warily. Worse, Lamar said gravely. Community service. Jason wasn't sure what it meant, but he held his eyes open wide as though it was something terrible. Will you leave him alone? Marla whispered, amused. He didn't see us, Jason reassured himself, though clearly unconvinced. Chile turned on the big light and showed it down the hallway. Oh my! Marla gasped as the first light streaked across the interior of the pizzeria. Suddenly it became real and her face flushed with awe and fear. They went in one by one. The temperature seemed to drop as soon as they walked into the hall, and Charlie shivered, but she did not feel ill at ease. She knew where they were now, and she knew what they would find. When they got to the dining room, Carlton spread his arms wide and twirled. Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he said in a booming announcer's voice. Jessica giggled, but the melodrama did not actually seem out of place. Marla and Lamar gaped at the room, awestruck. Charlie set to the large flashlight to the ground, and the beam facing up and lit up the main room in a dim and ghostly illumination. Cool, Jason said. His eyes fell in the merry-go-round, and he raced for it and jumped onto the back of a pudding before anyone could stop him. He was too big for it. His sneakers dangled all the way to the ground. Charlie smiled. How did I make it go? He shouted. Sorry, buddy, John said. Jason climbed off, disappointed. The arcade is over this way, Carlton said, motioning to anyone who might follow. Marla went with him, while Jason hopefully with the carousel's control box. Lamar had watched the stage and was standing transfixed, staring up at the animals. Charlie went over to him. I can't believe they're still here, he said when she walked up. Yeah, she said. I'd forgotten this was a real place. Lamar smiled, for the first time resembling the little boy Charlie had once known. Charlie smiled back. There was something surreal about the place. She had certainly never told any of her school friends about it. She would not have known where to begin. Worse, she would have not known where to stop. Jessica poked her head up from the ray-traced current at the side of the main stage, and they both startled. What are you doing? Lamar asked. Exploring, she said. There's nothing back here but a bunch of wires, though. She disappeared into the folds of cloth again. After a moment, they heard a thud as she jumped to the ground, and she came strolling over. Did they work? Lamar asked, pointing to the animals. I don't know, Charlie said. Truthfully, she had no idea how they worked. They had always been so intermittent life by whatever alchemy her father performed in his workshop. It doesn't look like anything is missing. They should work. She reluctantly added, though in her head she questioned the idea of trying to turn them on. Hey, Jessica exclaimed. She was kneeling by the stairs to the stage. Everyone come here now. Charlie went over and Lamar followed. What is it? Charlie asked. Look, Jessica said, shining her little light. Though well ahead along the grain of the wood, there was a door inset into the wall of the stage. How did we not see that? Charlie wondered. We weren't looking, John said, staring intentionally at the small door. The whole group had gathered, and now Jessica looked around at them with a grin, but her hand on the little doorknob and pulled. Magically, it opened. The door revealed a small second room. Jessica shone the light around it. It was full of equipment. One wall was covered in TV screens. Must be Must be CCTV, Lamar said. Come on. Jessica handed her flashlight to Charlie and swung her legs through the door. There was one deep step heading down into the room, which was no bigger than the large refrigerator turned on its side. That's a little too cramped for me. I'll keep looking around out here, John saluted. Then it turned as though to stand guard. This is like a clown car, Marla remarked as she jostled against Charlie. The space was too cramped for all of them, but they crowded together. Jason sat on the step, feeling more comfortable by the exit. There were 8 of the television screens across the hall, each of it its own little panel of buttons and knobs. Sticking up beneath them was a panel, almost a table covered in buttons. They were large and black, unlabeled, and spaced in irregular series. The other wall was blank except for a single large switch by the door. What does this do? Jason said, and his hand put on the switch. He hesitated just long enough for someone to stop him, then pulled it. The lights came on. What? Carlton looked at the others frantically. They all stared at one another in confused silence. Jason climbed up and poked his head out into the main room. They're all out here too, some of them at least, he said too loudly. Why is there power? Jessica whispered, reaching over Jason to pull the door closed again. How is it possible? Charlie said. This place has been open in 10 years. Cool. Marla leaned forward, studying the monitors as though expecting some sort of answer to be revealed. Turn on the TV, Jason said suddenly. I can't reach. Jessica flipped on the first TV and a static crackled across the screen. Nothing? Charlie asked impatiently. Just a sec. She twisted it down, wiggling back and forth until an image emerged. It was a stage, centered on Bonnie. The other animals were invisible. Jessica turned on the rest of the TVs, adjusted them until the pictures became clear, although most were still poorly lit. They still work, Charlie said, almost under her breath. Maybe, Jessica said. Maybe. Hey, someone go out there. See if the camera is live. Okay, Marla said after a brief hesitation, wriggling her way to the exit and awkwardly climbing over Jason. A moment later, she appeared on camera on stage beside Bonnie. Marla waved. She appeared multicolored as the stage lights bathed in her purple, green, and yellow from different sides. Can you see me? She asked. Yeah, Carlton shouted. Lamar was staring at the buttons. What else do these do? He said with a wicked grin, pressing one. Marla screamed. Marla, are you okay? Charlie shouted. What happened? Marla was standing still on the stage, but she had backed away from Bonnie and was staring at him as he might bite. He moved, Marla yelled. Bonnie moved. What did you do? Marla, Jessica yelled, laughing. It's okay, we pushed the button. Lamar pressed the button again, and they all watched the screen this time. Sure enough, Bonnie turned stiffly to one side. He pressed it again, and the rabbit swiveled back to face the absent audience again. Try another one, Carlton said. Go ahead, Lamar said, and climbed out of the little room to join Marla on stage. He crouched down to inspect Bonnie's feet. They're all attached to a swiveling panel, he called. Yeah, Jessica called back, not really listening. Carlton started pressing buttons as the rest of them watched the cameras. For a moment, Shelley left the room as well. It's too stuffy in here, she explained. Jessica's perfume and Carlton's hair gel, both of which smelled nice enough out in the open, were starting to form a sickly miasma. She stepped out into the open to watch them experiment with the animals on stage. Most of the dining room was still dark. There are 3 colored spotlights suspended from the ceiling, aiming beams of purple, yellow, and green at the stage. The animals were cast now in all natural colors, and dust in the beams of light shone like tiny stars, so many that it was difficult to see through them. The floor beneath the long tables was dusted with glitter that had fallen from the party hats. And as she looked around, she noticed again the drawings that lined the walls of the place, all the height of children's eyes. They had always been here, and Charlie wondered now where her father had gotten the first ones when the restaurant opened. He had used her own childish scribblings, or had he made them himself and stuck them up? Forgeries to encourage actual children to display their art? The thought of her father hunched over his workbench, gripping an unsteady crane with hands accustomed to manipulating microchips, made her want to giggle. She noticed the flashlight still in the center of the room, and she went to switch it on. Don't waste the battery. She said her head and chorus with Anjan's voice. She turned her attention to the stage. It looked like the others had gotten Chica and Bonnie to go through a series of small specific movements. They could each swivel their entire bodies back and forth, and their hands, feet, and heads could be moved in various directions, but each movement was separate. Shirley went back to the control room and stuck her head in. Can you make them do the dance? She asked. I don't know how, Carlton said, leaning back away from monitors. All of this must have been used to program the dances. I don't think someone was in here actually controlling everything during the shows. She shook his head with certainty. That would have been impossible. Huh, Charlie said. Everyone went quiet, Marla called out, and they all fell silent. For a long moment there was no sound. Then Lamar said, What? Marla frowned, tilting her head to the side, listening for something. I thought I heard something. She decided finally. It was like pings of a music box. Her mouth barely moved as she spoke. It's gone. Why isn't Freddy moving? Charlie asked. I don't know, Carlton said. I can't find the controls for him. Jessica said, tapping the monitors. These cameras don't show the whole place. Charlie peered at them, but they were mixed up in no logical order. She couldn't piece together a picture of the whole restaurant. There's 3 cameras on the stage, one on each animal, but there should be one on the whole thing. Jessica is saying, There's an entrance to the kitchen, but not the kitchen itself, and you can't see the hallway and the room with the little stage we were at last night. Maybe the cameras were just in the main room? Carlton suggested. Nope, said Jessica. There are cameras everywhere out there. So, Carlton said. So, there's gotta be another control room, Jessica said triumphantly. Maybe down the hall by the other stage. Charlie went about to the main room again. She was feeling restless, less excited about the discoveries than the others, though she was not sure why. She watched the stage. Carlton was still playing with the buttons. Bonnie Chica jerking in small disjointed motions as Freddy Fazbear remained motionless, his eyes half closed and his mouth slack, slightly open. Hey, Lamar said suddenly. Marla, the music. I hear it now. Everyone went silent again. Then Marla shook her head. Creepy, she said, more excited this time, rubbing her hands together as though they were sharing campfire stories. Lamar looked thoughtfully at Freddy. Let's go find the other control room, Jessica said, emerging with a determined look on her face. Okay, Mother jumped from the stage to join them, and they started scanning the rest of the stage, looking for a second door. I'm staying in here, Jason called for the first room. This is so cool. Chica swiveled back and forth rapidly on the stage as he pushed her button repeatedly. Lamar went to join Jason. Okay, my turn, he said. Leaning on the door, he went in, not waiting for Jason's response. Charlie stayed where she was, still staring at Freddy, frozen in the middle of his act. John came up next to her, and she felt a flash of irritation. She did not want to be collegiate and join on the search. He stood there for a moment, looking at Freddy, then leaned in close to her and whispered, I'm not counting to 100. You better hide. Surprised out of her thoughts, she looked at him for a moment, her irritation broken. He wanted her, then covered his eyes. It was absurd. It was childish, and in that moment, it was the only thing she wanted to do. Slightly giddy, Charlie took off, looking for a place to hide. Jason pushed a series of buttons again with increasing frustration. I'm bored now, he announced. How can you be bored? Lamar said, wide-eyed. They aren't working anymore. Jason continued to press buttons, no longer watching the monitors. Lamar studied the monitor. Bonnie's head was up and turned to the side, his eyes appearing to watch the camera. Well, go find your sister then, he told Jason. I don't need her permission to be bored. Impatiently, Jason climbed up and out of the control room. Everyone is so sensitive, Lamar muttered, Suddenly realizing he was alone in the control room, he climbed up, but Jason was already gone. Jessica was leading to the exploration party, heading toward the little stage they had discovered the night before. Marla looked back and saw Jason escaping to catch up just before they disappeared into the long hall. Hey, be careful. She called over her shoulder as Jason branched off into his own direction. Lamar caught up to the group and followed them on their way into the hall. The main dining room was empty now, though Jason could hear Charlie's and John's playful shouts echoing from the party rooms that extended off the main building, left alone. Jason headed straight for the arcade. It was more dimly lit than the rest of the place, and without power, the arcade machines appeared to be as towering black monoliths in a forgotten graveyard. The air was still and thin. Jason went to the nearest console and pressed a few buttons. Some stuck with age, but nothing happened. Plug it in, duh. He ducked behind the games to check, but even though the mounds of wires seemed impossibly tangled, it looked like they were plugged in. Maybe there's a switch for the whole room? He started checking the walls. There was no obvious switch, but as Jason scanned the walls, he became distracted by the children's drawings taped in clusters. Jason was too young to have any memories of his own from being at Freddy's. Even a hurricane itself was no more than a hazy set of impressions, but something about the pictures brought a sense of nostalgia. They were all the same, really, the kinds of drawings he and every other kid had done. Figures with circles for bodies and sticks for arms, and a multitude of colors. Only a few details showed which figures are the animals. Jacob with her beak, Bonnie with his ears. It seemed like there had been a little more attention paid to the drawings of Freddy Fazbear. They were a little better. The children had been a lot more careful to make the details right. Jason found himself looking at the drawing in particular. It was the same as the others, maybe a little better. Bunny the Buddy hugging a child. There was no name at the bottom. Jason took the picture off the wall, uncertain why this one particular interested him so much. John burst into the room with a wide grin and a deep breath, but then, seeing that it was only Jason inside, he quickly returned to his stoic demeanor. What's up? He nodded his head, playing it cool, then casually stepped away before suddenly returning to his sprint. Plenty of hide and seek like babies, Jason thought. I hope I never fall in love. He looked back down at the drawing and squinted as though not seeing correctly. The child was now facing away from Bonnie. Jason stared for a long moment. Was he hugging Bonnie before? He looked out of the main room, but Marla was out of sight, looking for the control room. Jason folded the drawing carefully and put it in his pocket. It was suddenly apparent, now quiet, and had become outside. Jason stepped out timidly and peeked into the dining room. Guys, he whispered, looking back once, then ventured out to find the group. Jessica, Lamar, Carlton, and Marla were still creeping slowly through the other half of the building. The spotlights from the dining room didn't reach this far, only accenting edges and corners or specks of glitter. Jessica scanned the walls and with her flashlight, looking for breaks in the plaster and motioning to Marla to do the same. We have to check for a hidden door, she said. The last one wasn't really hidden, Carlton pointed out. Yeah, Jessica conceded, but she kept her light on the wall, clearly not ready to give up the hunt. They passed two bathrooms they had not noticed the night before. Do you think the plumbing still works? Carlton said. I really need to pee. What are you, 5 years old? I don't want to hear that. Jessica rolled her eyes and walked faster. When they got to the room with the little stage, everyone stopped. Marla and Lamar went closer to the stage, drawing together slightly as if unaware they were doing it. Even though Carlton and Jessica had been there the night before, it was as though they were seeing it anew through Marla's and Lamar's eyes. Just they still had not seen what was behind the curtain. Carlton realized suddenly. I remember these posters, Lamar said.